Wake up and deliver.
Oh, geez, we're starting off early, a little bit later than usual. Holy.
Yeah,
Oh, we got our dedicated listener.
there's Kat. Very pleased with the new start time. A little slower start to the morning.
A little slower start to the morning. I think you got to do that "Wake Up and Deliver" soundtrack that you have on the recording there, John. Wake
I
up
know.
and
Yeah,
deliver.
exactly. Wake up and deliver. I was asking my buddy, I'm like, dude, how do I get this thing to play? He's like, you might need a deck thing. And I'm like, oh yeah? He's like, yeah, it's totally worth buying. He's like, I've got it, it's the best.
That's horrible. I don't know. It's catching on. It's like
Oh, it is catching on.
stanza.
Exactly. Exactly. Sooner or later, everyone's gonna be just walking around saying it, being like, it's in my head all day, and I don't know why. Be like, I do.
Didn't you say your kids are doing it? They're like, they're going, "Wake up and
Yeah.
deliver."
Yeah, my kids, they hear it and they're like, "Oh, Dad!" And then my middle daughter was saying it. She's like, "It's stuck in my head." I'm like, "That's the point."
that is the point. All right, let's start off with some coffee for the mind, like we usually do. I had a few choices this morning, but I think this one's a good one. Keep the goal, change your mind about how to reach it. One sign that you're getting in your own way is not changing your tactics when you're not getting the results you want. I thought that was kind of good. People always often get stuck in the way of their doing things. Doesn't mean your goal changes. It might be just the way how you're getting there needs to change. So changing often is good. How to reach that goal.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that talk about the fact that the biggest gap people have in terms of achieving their goals is really consistency and just being able to keep at it. And to your point, right? You can maybe shift or be like, "Oh, this isn't working 100%, or I have to do it a different way," but um, you're still trying to get to the same place, and it doesn't mean that just because you're not having immediate success that either your goal is bad or something is not worth doing.
Exactly. Or you realize the strategy that you're taking to get there is just the wrong strategy and you're just not achieving how you want to achieve it. So it's time to adjust. It's time to wake up and deliver different goals, different
There,
strategies.
there you go. So
it
what's going on
is.
this morning?
What's that?
I said, what's going on this morning? What caught your attention? What do you want to get into?
There's a few things. Well, I think we'll avoid the news from the weekend just because it's a little polarized. So we'll stay away from that. But I think kind of neat, interesting news that's coming around the corner is obviously Prime Day this year. I don't know
Yeah,
how close you've been following that, John, but you know what? What is it? 4 days out? Or
two
less than that.
starts
It's 2 days
tomorrow.
out. Tomorrow,
Yeah,
tomorrow, and the next day. So
yeah.
how much is it affecting freight? In the past, I know it was a big thing. It was almost like another for us Boxing Day or Black Friday. It was in the midsummer. It kind of was a nice push, but I don't think there's much being changed. The post 4th of July has been very much a readjustment back to pre 4th of July numbers. So I don't see Prime Day being a big effect on the overall market. What do you think?
I think well, I think there's a couple things. So I had put some stuff like that in the newsletter on Sunday. Yeah. Just about like the actual DSD part, but well, DSD, the last mile part. But I don't know. I think sometimes is that, Amazon's pretty dialed in and tuned in. I think you've probably already seen a lot of the impact. Like these guys aren't walking around being very reactive, being like, "Oh man, we got to cover like 350 loads in the next 72 hours." Like they know a lot of this Prime Day activity from a delivery perspective even kicked up over a week ago now. So to me, like the actual bulk transportation, the intra warehouse moves, all of that stuff, it's probably already been going on for the better part of a month. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but they don't know what's going to be the hot item yet, right? They have an idea. They have things that are positioned to be
Oh,
hot items, but you don't know what people are going to buy. So you might have positioned the wrong item in the
maybe
wrong area.
maybe
Maybe
they do. Maybe
maybe
I always think it's interesting. Everyone thinks that what they buy is so like personalized and stuff, and I agree that obviously there's so many consumers and they're buying all kinds of things. But I mean, what people are quote unquote primed for, right, mentally, in terms of like, what are the offers, when it's going to come out. Like, I mean, even if you think about the fact that they have this cadence of being like, oh, there's going to be a new deal every 5 minutes, it actually really means that from all of the product that they're going to offer. They already have essentially like a deployment schedule. They have a presentation schedule. And honestly, Amazon is just so consumer centric and so data and tech centric. I think that there's a lot of shaping that they're capable of that really doesn't get discussed because nobody likes to be like, I can get you to buy what I want you to buy. Like, no, like that's not a strong sales message for anybody, despite the fact it's the position that every seller wants to be in.
Yeah, but they have like discounts on millions of items. It's not just like you were in the past at Best Buy or Future Shop for our sake. You knew which items were going to be the hot buy for Boxing Day, and they positioned it properly. You had an extra inventory of it. You're talking about millions of different items across 35 different categories. Positioned across all of North America. How do you know what's going to be the item in that location, and do you have enough drivers to deliver? Because part of that expectation is most people are going to want this as soon as possible. They're not willing to wait for any of it.
Yeah, but I mean, again, that's not necessarily that much different than a regular day at Amazon, right? Like in the sense that when you make that purchase and when they make that offer, they already know like, okay, where are you located? How much inventory do I have in my network? How much inventory do I have at like the local node or the regional kind of deployment? Like what's my capability of moving it from A to B to C or whatever? Like that's all normal day. I agree with you. It's completely ramped up when you're thinking about something like a promo like Prime Day. But obviously they've added more resources. They're probably extending shifts and they're operating in a different way, which completely increases their capacity and then their ability to push product through. But again, the undertone still being is that, yeah, for as many products as they have and all of these things, right? I think I've told you this joke before, but the idea that Amazon is the first person to know that a woman is pregnant, right? Even before, like,
Yeah.
sometimes before her partner, her mother, whatever. And it's just because of how much data and how closely they're watching. So, they do have millions of products and stuff like that. But let's be real. Like if I were Amazon, if you were Amazon, would you legitimately just hope for the most spray and pray attitude and just hope that you can survive it? Or would you really do everything that you can to make sure of saying, hey, yeah, I'm going to offer, like something very simplistic that probably people would really understand. Well, if I'm going to offer great deals on apparel, and I know that people love buying sports apparel, well, like I'm not going to load up my Philadelphia warehouse with a bunch of Dodger gear. Like, do you know what I mean? So it's like they're having all of the right stuff. So different offers and similar things to different people, but kind of still very targeted. I think there's a lot more shaping that goes on than people think because what you see and what I see on Amazon, you just assume we see the same thing.
Yeah, but we
No
don't.
one,
It's tailored.
you
It's
don't really
tailored.
know. You don't really know.
Yeah, they already know what kind of preferences. I should say what my wife likes on my Prime.
Oh.
I don't go. I don't go on often. The things that it says, I don't need makeup removal that often. I swear.
Uh-huh.
But to the point, like they already know in it ahead of time, right? So that's a fair point. I'm just curious if they've optimized that final route where it's going to be a lot of consolidating, or they're going to have. Like, am I going to see 6 Prime trucks show up to my house on Prime the next day after Prime Day because I ordered 6 different things, or they're going to be a far more efficient on that final mile aspect
Mm.
and consolidate within that neighborhood? Because it
No,
still kind of
yeah.
seems kind of disconnected on that aspect for sure.
Yeah, I think you'll probably see less efficiency in terms of pure density or going into, like I think you probably would see that if you ordered a bunch of stuff that you could see getting it multiple days. But I mean, again, Amazon they're pretty great with their stuff. Like the flex drivers, right? They're already kind of like usually like a 30 package per delivery block. Like that's kind of what they set. A regular Amazon delivery truck would be 25 to 30 packages, just given the broader mix of product that they put on like, their own DSP or the, style trucks versus like the flex drivers. But both of them see dramatic increases in terms of what they're expected to deliver now over the same period, just pure because of density. Like
Yeah.
purely because of what it goes up. Like the prime drivers are more than 10%, like they're into the 35, 40 range now. And it wouldn't be uncommon to see DSP sort of normal traditional runs that do 250 to 300 packages up to 450.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's
That's
nifty.
not stops though. Keep in mind that there's a difference. They really group the concept of packages versus stops versus whatever. Like they have an interesting, they have actually a really contentious kind of breakdown about what they consider a stop and now what they consider multi stops. Like you'll get drivers being like Amazon considers this one stop, and it's literally like 4 or 5 addresses that are all within the same kind of block, but like you're most certainly not just going to one door.
Right, you're almost mail manning it out or mail personing it out to the individual houses because you've stopped and you're able to hit those four quick
Hmm.
houses as you're chucking that newspaper. Um, I forgot to start off because I kind of jumped right into the Amazon because you caught me off guard. But today is a special day. It
Oh,
is very much your birthday, John. Happy birthday to you.
thank you. Yeah, thank
And,
you.
and you're doing something kind of cool. You're doing a little bit of a road trip, and
Yeah.
you've experienced the trucker lifestyle.
Yeah,
Um,
a little bit. The micro trucker lifestyle, or like getting into even how it applies to smaller vehicles for sure.
so, what's the experience? Tell us what you did, where you went, and how your loading and strapping went down, and how that turned out for you.
Yeah, I don't know. So down, rented like one of these like camper vans, where they do up the inside so you can like crash in it, like you can cook and like there's like sinks and everything like that. So very cool. But obviously it's not your standard like consumer style like street level vehicle. It might a high roof, like a bit of an extended body, obviously, and stuff like that. And changes with the wheelbase and the weight and everything like that compared to what you'd see with a regular car. And yeah, so it's interesting. So they have like all of like the cargo area kind of like down towards the back, and they have this like bed built up over it, which is cool. But thinking that you just kind of throw everything in there, and the floor is kind of got like a laminate, so it's pretty slick, right? Like more so than you would see in a general trailer, but probably maybe tantamount to thinking with like a trailer just with like basic wood floors and no kind
Yep.
of no kind of like differentiated flooring like that. And it's funny to see that even driving. So this thing is also, I don't know. I call it governed, but I had someone at my old work not even know what I mean. Do you know what that means when you say it's governed, or do you use some other term? The engine.
Governed, like is the truck is governed to a certain speed limit?
Yeah, 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 exactly.
Yeah,
Okay. I
yeah.
said I said that one time over at Brinks, and the guy was like, look at me like I had two heads, and I was like, well, what do you call it? I actually forget what he said now. But anyways, uh, so yeah, it's speed limited, right? It looks like it's actually set to 70 miles an hour because it's got a really weird. It ends up like 113, 114 per kilometers. But that in itself also makes it really challenging because obviously you have limited power when you're passing, very similar to most commercial trucks on the road. When I was in the food industry, we actually at one point started asking people to go no more than 95 kilometers an hour, which I guess is what
That's
55,
that's what it's.
60, 60, not even 60 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's a little bit less. It's like 57, 55 almost. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, doing that, but it's crazy as you're driving to see that you're trying to like just move with regular traffic. The aggressiveness of cars, honestly, really trash. And then these people at one point, like you're looking out the rear view mirror, they're so pissed. They're like leaning on the horn. You're like, where do you want me to go? One, there's people in front of me. Two, this thing's like a boat. So you know what I mean? And they're like whipping around and whatever and getting so mad. But it's interesting, just taking corners and whatever. Like these laptops are going flying, like bags are sliding up the middle of the aisle and everything. And it's not even from that shoddy driving. Like, you know what I mean? So you can't really say it's the driver. Other than being surprised and maybe having to really realize that you have to be even more mindful about your braking. But it's crazy to see how much load shifts. And the reason why bringing that up is because I think you and I both experienced, like, you have a tractor trailer, like you have a load of product that gets delivered to someone, they crack that back door and they roll it up or they open the barn doors, and it looks like the load shifted and tilted and pushed everywhere. And people start immediately thinking, like, was it loaded wrong? Is it strapping issues? Is it wrap issues on the pallet? Was it just the driver? Like, so many things can come up, but it's just not that easy, especially when you're going, maybe thousands of miles.
Yeah, well, like the drivers, like you don't necessarily. It's not necessarily bad driving. It could be the other driver that kind of made you jerk your wheel a little bit too quickly. someone surprised you, might be braking a little bit harder than usual. It doesn't take much to shift that load. And you're right. Automatically, everybody's like, "Oh, the driver is driving recklessly." Not at all. It could have been just a bad turn going into your area, or you know backing up, and someone drove behind you because they were impatient. You had to hit that brake a little bit extra hard to safely back up. But as always, people are kind of looking at that transporter as that means of a fault, and then same as the loading. You're not necessarily watching how they're loading it. If you're not using proper block and bracing or strapping it down,
Hmm.
it makes it hard. And you got to remember, it's 45,000 pounds worth of freight sometimes on the back of a trailer. You had what, maybe like 600 pounds of.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
if that, and then yeah, and to your point, actually, the funny thing is too is that there is obviously a trade off too in your loading, right? There's like safe loading, and then there's extra safe or really like extra precaution loading and stuff like that. But anything that you do to really extra secure that load means that any unload is a lot slower and it's gonna have a
yep.
lot more impact, right? Because now you're having to undo all of that stuff, and you're not just necessarily kind of able to push a bunch of pallets on and pull a bunch of pallets off and really quickly process and turn those trailers when it gets to loading docks.
Yeah, people don't realize how important it is to have a full volumed out trailer for security wise. So it doesn't that's what it's meant for. The trailer is built in a way that your skids are completely full. It goes against the back door pretty much. You cannot shift as easy because when it's in compact in that kind of position, it's all level. It's perfect. The problem arises when you start doing like different, 2-1-2-1 loading styles and there's spaces, or the skids are off size because you've worked on different volumes. It can really create a mess on that for sure.
Well, or even in some of the LTL is pretty popular, right? That FedEx thing, everyone seems very interested in LTL since that post blew up like a week and a half ago. But LTL is another challenge, right? Because same thing, you want to have full trailers. You obviously want to try and get maximize your move, but like you're not going to be able to move necessarily every trailer completely full, like maxed out in every way. So then you get the added complexity of actually trying to distribute the weight properly in the trailer, having to maybe block off some of the nose, pull pallets back, try to center things properly, like for what you now have on the trailer, which to your point about, securing the load and everything like that just increases the complexity.
Yeah, well, even talk about LTL. People even break down skids sometimes and hand bomb it into a trailer just so you get better volume depending on the density of the product too.
Yeah. Actually, that's funny. When we built the network out west, and I had all the runs, I had everything all set up. One thing that became a bit of an issue was that the trailers were obviously full because they were going like a huge distance, right? Like they were going, um, you know, uh, into other provinces and whatever, and didn't have as many challenges in the past because the network was like a little bit tighter for these kinds of store deliveries and stuff like that. About worrying too much if it went over capacity because it's like, okay, well, I have a lot of other runs, I have a lot of other resources, I can, sort of mix things around and still make all these deliveries. But when all of a sudden you're sending like one trailer to like Regina or whatever, and you're like, no, there's one, and like I'm not sending a whole other trailer with like three skids, it really
Yeah,
becomes interesting on how you load it. And it was the first time ever in my career that we had to start doing what you just said there about manually breaking down tons of pallets, pushing stuff up the middle, which obviously was not well received by the depots and the plants because now they're like, guys, we don't want to rebuild skids. It's like, yeah, well, we don't want to send two trailers thousands of miles. So
yeah. We want efficiency on both ends, and well, it's a hidden cost of that productivity to unload it with an extra team or whatever. And are you really saving it if you could have just sent it? Depends on the distance, right? So,
yeah,
and
well,
there's a
like it's
lot
funny.
into it.
Yeah, and it's funny too. And actually, if you take it to another area that people don't, have a lot of experience with, have you spent a lot of time dealing with like these, like food distributors like Unfoy and KeHE and Summit and all of these types of guys?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
So
GFS and
yeah,
Flanagan's and all those guys. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
all of these guys. So a lot of them, what most people don't realize is that even if you're a vendor or whatever, like their intake, because of the fact that they're building loads for so many different customers, right? Different restaurants, different players, whatever. They have a very different structured warehouse, for example, a lot of the time than than they do. So it's like if you're working with them as a vendor and you might sell them 13 SKUs, very often they want all of that broken out, right? Like they want to be able to load their bins or load their pallet positions like by SKU. But as a vendor, we're not selling them enough volume to actually make 13 different pallets of 13 different SKUs. So you have these
Yeah.
mixed and consolidated pallets. But then when you get to their dock, you have to break it all down. And then, again, same kind of thing, right? Like people don't understand. It's like, well, how you load it, how a pallet is prepared and sort of stacked and how you use whatever you use to secure it. But then these guys will then often, to your point, have all of these additional costs of like what I guess the industry calls it lumpers, probably like a terrible,
Yes.
terrible name. Like,
Lumpers, yes.
yeah, but to like break everything down and rebuild it, and like all of these costs that people have that people have to incur that no one really talks about until you're dealing with the nitty gritty of this stuff.
Yeah, lumpers are actually an interesting topic because they're far more common in the U.S. than it is in Canada. You have some
Hmm.
places that you have lumpers, but it's usually the transporter has to pay for it, and then he has to charge back his customer. And sometimes it's like unloading the whole trailer because it might be a union facility, and they're not going on to a trailer, so it's like this intermediary service that brings everything out to specific areas, so then the warehouse can work it. And then you gotta pay for those lumpers, and it's interesting. It's far more common in produce. I've seen it a lot more far more common in produce, but there's a whole bunch of different areas that people use those lumpers, and it's like you said, breaking down those skids because it's a little bit too much work for the warehouse worker to do it. So they want someone else to kind of go in and take care of it.
Yeah, and even like coming kind of like tying this into the stuff you're talking about, like Prime Day and all of these consumer goods containers when they come across. These
Oh,
aren't like,
de-stuffing.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
these things, like, I mean, most people in the industry know, but if you're not really super exposed, it's like containers aren't these like easy to unload things. It's like literally like what a child would do in the sense of, in the sense of like putting away their toys. Like they just put everything in a box.
They just stuff it in there.
Yeah.
That's why it's called de-stuffing and restuffing, right? It is. Sometimes it's a excuse the language. It's a shit show when you open up those trailers because you don't know how they've loaded it. It's all flow loaded. They might not have slip sheets. It's like and there's a whole industry around it, like building up skids off of container de-stuffing because it's such hard work, right?
Yeah, no, exactly, right. And how that goes into the warehouse, how you're quickly rebuilding pallets, how you take that into inventory. Like imagine a lot of businesses, have a whole inbound process where you're de-stuffing these containers, putting things on pallets, pallets to racking, and then these things go into some kind of pick face, and then they're going right back out on a truck on more pallets. It's really insane the amount of in and out and where a box goes just so someone can like roll into X store or whatever and just easily grab something off the shelf.
Well, you're not even talking about the picking and packing off a container. Sometimes you have to take those packages apart and repackage them because here, well, in
Yeah.
Canada, you got to put the French Canadian labels on it. When it came across from China, it didn't have it, or sometimes even to the U.S. Like it's sometimes it becomes far more crazier than people anticipate. But let's shift it a little bit because I think there's another topic that we should touch upon,
Okay.
and we're going to be talking a little bit more about it this week on Friday. But I think it's a good one, kind of give a prelude to returns. We're going to be
Oh.
talking with Jessica on a live video show this Friday, our regular monthly podcast. We're talking about returns. You want to maybe touch a little bit upon that today, John?
Yeah, I think returns is something that's kind of exploding. You've got all kinds of different solutions. You got a lot of people talking about it. Even Amazon getting in there talking about they're going to be picking up returns now with their drivers direct to people's home. Which I've shared some of my thoughts about home pickup for returns before, but we'll probably get into that again. And yeah, and I think obviously with Prime Day, anytime you have a big surge event, right? Everyone talks about things like that after Christmas, but totally going to see it again after Prime Day. And it's more than just a consumer facing thing, right? Like, I mean, um, you know, what are the types of things that you see on the back end of returns from a bulk transport side very often?
Well, I'm more curious actually. What do you think the percentage of returns is going to be off of Prime Day? Actually, that you brought that up. Do you think a lot of product that is bought it gets returned after someone gets it, or was it a compulsory buy and they didn't really want it? And Amazon has created these bins now. There, you go to the stores and it's like Tuesday it's a $5 bin, by Thursday it's a 33-cent bin. How effective are those for the returns?
Yeah, I don't honestly. I've never been into one of those stores. There's a couple of them though. I keep meaning to want to go in, but you're right. They're interesting, right? Like, oh, we get our product on Saturday. It starts at 5, 10, 15, $20, and you're right. By next Friday, it's like it's a dollar because it's what's left, right? And people don't want. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, I'd honestly, of course, there's going to be anytime that you have like pressure sales tactics, and I don't even mean that they're being negative with the how they sell. But anytime you sell on FOMO or you sell on deals or you sell on impulse, like you know what I mean, you're gonna get probably more returns than average. And then e-com returns in general are bad. Returns in general are pretty bad. You just don't see it as much in the store because people decide to not make their purchase decision right there. Like so that mind shift from a customer is happening all the time. But because e-com actually completes a transaction and then you have to return it or kind of reverse the transaction, for sure you're gonna see it spike, right? Like apparel like clothing, like 30%. Like it's insane.
Well, maybe talk about that quickly, because I'm curious what your thoughts are. What's the main difference? Is it easier for a store to take a return or e-commerce? And what's the process for a store to take a return, and what do they do with it versus an e-commerce brand?
Um, I mean, I think it's probably tough. Like the idea of who's easier to process. Do I think you probably get better processing and grading outside of a store? Yeah, I think you probably do because like if you're in a warehouse environment, especially with a lot of the tools and stuff you have available these days, to actually get a quality assessment and regrade and decision matrix on that piece, I think is probably easier outside of a store because you don't necessarily train store employees for that kind of work, right? Processing, you want them to be customer facing and you want them to be sales focused, you want them to be solution oriented on there for the customers. um, do I think it has a better chance to quickly get back into inventory at the store though? Yeah, which is probably why a lot of people still try to promote it because hoping that it looks good enough where the customer never really touched it, that it's an easy decision to just be able to put it back onto the floor as a resellable product.
So what does an e-commerce brand do if it's a good enough product? By the time it gets back, do they put it back in, or do they end up in these bins? Do you know what the process is there?
Well, that's where everyone's trying to really work the problem, right? Is that it can be both, and because the challenge is how fast and what type of product, right? Like, so if you're an e-com brand and for whatever reason, like it's a standard product for you, it's a like black T-shirt or your main logo T-shirt or whatever. It's probably the speed at which it turns back in probably doesn't really matter. But if it's a seasonal thing, if it's a time sensitive thing, for example, because it's around an event or a particular type of thing, whatever happens to be going on, it usually doesn't happen fast enough, right? So that's where you get this split thing, and it's like even if it's like a standard pair of swim trunks, it's like, oh, I have all summer to sell it. Yeah, but it's like if it goes out whatever, and then you lose half the summer, 3 4 weeks by the time it gets to a completely resellable condition, most people, even though it might be midsummer, have already made those purchases. So you kind of miss the windows. So that's where then it starts going into these other parts of the decision matrix about like, is it worth holding, right? Gap through COVID made a really bold move on deciding to not liquidate inventory and just hold it for the next year, which is probably
Yeah.
because it was a lot of their basics and whatever. Um, but most e-com brands especially wouldn't have that type of holding power and the ability to float that cost. Um, so they then start looking, okay, do I just start using clearance on my own website? Do I use clearance in my own stores? Do I use a reseller, like someone that I can sell to, like selling to TJ Maxx or whatever, right? Like getting product out that way, for example. Um, do I decide to ship it to another country and get it for a complete resale? Do I actually have to destroy it? So it gets into a really interesting decision matrix, right? When you're looking at that.
Well, it's curious that clothing is one of the hardest things, because clothing is such a like a in the heat of the moment. It's the style today and it's gone tomorrow. So if you take a little bit of time and return it, like you said, Gap did that and held on. It could be a big problem for them. But that's why I'm kind of curious. Customer loyalty, I think, it really relies on that return. Because if you look at the names that people love the most, like Costco, their return policy is top notch. They'll take anything as long as it's in
Top
good
notch
quality.
is top notch is relative. Top notch for the consumer,
Well,
disastrous for the supplier.
yeah, but they make it work, right? So it's a disaster for the supplier, but you gotta got to please the consumer to want to keep coming through those doors and get those memberships up, right? So I think returns is going to be a very important thing going on and going forward. I mean, and then if you have a better, good quality return process and feel, I think you're going to attract more customers. I've noticed a lot of retailers, that e-commerce brands that are like, no, we don't take returns, or we charge you for returns. A lot of people are hesitant to buy from them, and it kind of affects that initial sale. Like I know, if I look at something I'm buying and it has a horrible return policy, and if it's online, I don't think I'm buying it.
Yeah, and I get that, and I think I was joking about this where it was talking about like the low quality of stuff and like obviously giving people protection. Is that really so interesting? What I personally think, and we get into more on Friday, is I think it has to be more of a hybrid approach because you're right in the sense of saying, oh, having a really easy return policy makes it great for sales and this and that on the consumer side. But honestly, it's not sustainable. It's destroying profitability. It's destroying the planet in a lot of way with all of these in and out goods and people having like no care for it. So it honestly can't continue that way. But you're right in the sense that if people don't feel they have access to it, you're creating a very large barrier, making it harder for people then to buy. Personally, what I think, and like I said, we can get into it more Friday. I think it has to be a hybrid where in your example there, hey Matt, you're a new customer of my brand. Great. Like, of course, like, yeah, you're gonna have access to maybe a certain type of return policy for a limited period of time. So as you're a new customer, as you're getting used to the brand, as you're getting used to the fit of that clothing, as you're getting used to how we do things, I'm gonna give you a little bit more grace. But once you're an established customer, if you're a customer with multiple purchases, it's like, Matt, like you bought that black t-shirt before. You kind of know what our sizing's like, and you know what our quality's like.
Stop
So
buying
like,
it.
yeah, it's like I don't really think you need to keep boomeranging me, Matt. Like, you know what I mean? So I really do think that there's going to be an evolution. There has to be an evolution, and I talk a lot about what I call like the returns credit score, which more people are actually starting to listen to and incorporating in kind of various ways. But I really think that that's the future of e-com returns in general. Probably more returns in general, but definitely e-commerce for sure.
That's a great topic. I think we'll touch more upon on Friday. I think it's a good little tidbit for everybody that was kind of listening. Final thoughts, John, because we're right on time.
We are.
It was a great conversation this morning. What do you want to leave off with? I'll let you say the goodbyes this morning.
No, I don't have a lot. I can have a good week, busy week, get caught up on a few different things. So I hope everyone enjoys and that business and everything rolls for everybody as Prime Day's coming around and hopefully getting people focused. I know it's summer, but Q4 is coming up. I see all the back to school stuff, which means that all that sort of October, November, December stuff is well on its way.
Q4 is coming up, and it's scary how quickly it is. Well, as always, thank you everybody for joining. Happy birthday to you today, John.
Thank you.
Join us next week, Monday. We'll have it at the exact same time, 7:30. For all those that joined us today, thank you. Come again and join the conversation. See you next week. Cheers, everybody.
Bye.